it's time. We need to get some moss. This is not where I normally come, but it was the only place I could think of where there's a track where I won't get my feet wet. Maybe not. I've only got my trainers on. I didn't think I'd need my wellies because I've been up and down this track many times over the years. I've never seen puddles, but I think it's the maintenance again. Once you get a dip, it fills with water and the car tyres go through and splash the muck out of the bottom, which makes it deeper, and then it gets deeper and deeper, and so it goes on. Strange place this is. Out there looks dry, doesn't it? I can assure you it's not. I've actually collected some sphagnum moss from this area in the past, but not quite sure what's going on here. But that's destruction. That's man-made bashing down of trees and undergrowth for whatever reason. Lots have been cut here. There's a good reason for this, I believe, is that this, as I said, this is a special environment, very acidic. The high point there is one of the few dry places until you get to that high point in the distance near the road, and everything in between is looks like it's just shallow puddles with sphagnum on the top, and some of them are 6-8 foot deep. You can disappear out of sight. It's actually quite a dangerous place. We won't be going out there, we're just going up into the trees and then off to the side and see if I can find some moss, and then we'll be on our way back. I don't plan on staying out late. I'm not quite sure what's been doing this. I don't know whether they're trying to dry areas of it out or what. But, anyway, I'll shut down till we get farther in. There's lots of undergrowth here that now isn't. An awful lot. Oh. I doubt if I can zoom in on that. Oh, it's going to come and see us anyway. Long-tailed tit. I doubt if you even saw that. Used to get them in around the garden, but I haven't seen any this winter at all. Anyway, I shall shut down in case until I see something else, and we'll go from there. But huge amount of undergrowth has been cleared here. I wonder what else has been going on. Yeah, I've just stepped off the track, just literally off the track. The different types of ground moss here. Now this is very heavily shaded, so this ground would be permanently damp. So this might not be the best type of moss, but it looks very nice. I think that's called fern moss. On the grounds it looks a little like ferns. And where did I see it? Somewhere there. That's a nice looking moss. Fluffy. And various other types, like that one in there. It's interesting. And the moss that's growing on the base of the tree would be the best type to take back with me, but that's a living tree. That moss won't come off very easily. I'm looking for fallen trees because it often comes off with the bark, but I will bear this place in mind as there's several different types of moss in one single place, so we may return to this place. Now this might be a better idea. A lot of large trees have been, these aren't fallen trees, they've been cut, but the stumps that have been left behind have left a place for moss to grow. It's a matter of, does it lift off very easily? Yes, it does. It comes off in nice pieces, so we will collect some of that, and I may go back to the other place and get some of the different types it could be useful. Who knows? But we'll get a fair bit of this collected. I don't want to spend too long here. Amazing, isn't it? I've been coming here years and never seen a soul apart from the Land Rover from the house that lives at the end of that track. And I've seen two couples today walking. I bet they've never been here in their life. But because we're locked down and we're not supposed to be going out, there's people everywhere. Anyway, we'll have some of this, I think. Good, isn't it? I've been going to that place for years for a walk in the habitat. Coming soon, a month's time, there are some quite rare birds, providing you keep still and in cover, you don't break the skyline. There's also some interesting birds in the tops of the conifers, but you can't film them any sense because they're always silhouetted against the sky. So all you get is like a silhouette, you don't see their colours and everything. But there's gold crests there, there's fire crests, all three woodpeckers in those woods. So yeah, it's an interesting place to go, and in all the years I've been going there I've never seen anyone, and I've met two couples and a guy with a dog today. I should have had a hint really, because to get to the place where that track starts, there isn't really any parking there. There's room for like 2 cars either side of the gate so that you don't block the gate. But 400 yards farther back there is a sports centre, social club, recycling bins and parking for about 50 cars. And as I drove past, that area was virtually full of cars from all these people who are not supposed to be going out because we're still locked down. And some of them had obviously walked right up over the top of the hill and down the other side and onto the track that I was on. Flipping nuisance. Right, let's see what I gathered, see how many bugs we've brought home. I should have several different types in here. I picked up some of the fern moss, as I call it, mainly because it looks like fern fronds. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. Don't quote me on it though, I know nothing about the names of the types of moss or really anything about them. I just look at where they're growing to see if they're liable to be suitable. That's the idea anyway. I wonder how many bugs we've brought home. I must admit the last lot of moss I brought home, there weren't any. There just weren't any bugs, which is surprising given it's very damp and very moist and a perfect habitat possibly for slugs and snails. But anyway, I'm just picking the worst of the dead leaves and stuff out. I don't want to keep all that, twigs and bits and bobs. Now one thing I am going to have a problem with is some trays to keep this in. We might have to sacrifice the sphagnum moss because it doesn't work, so what is the point in keeping it? But I've got 2 trays of that in the grow room, serving no purpose apart from humidity trays, and they use up my RO water when I'm not going to use the moss, so it might be better to just chuck that out in the garden. The birds will use that for their nests, I expect, and use the trays for moss that I am going to use. Yeah, that's nice, I like that fluffy stuff. Right, so that's one type. So you can sort through it with your fingers. There's no bugs. You know, you'd see them, they'd be upset and wriggling around and trying to get away. So I think we're okay with that stuff. Now that did come off the ground, so I'm not sure whether that's going to work. There's more of it too. Yeah, I'm going to have trouble with having enough trays for this lot. That's for sure. But it's a nice place to go, and you know, if I haven't got space to keep all of this, it can just go out in the garden. You never know, it might even grow out there, in under the hedge, or up the other end of the hedge where it stays in permanent shade. You never know, it might get a hold on the ground. It's better than just looking at bare earth, having a nice green covering to it. If it doesn't get any sun, it might stay moist enough to actually grow. Right, that will do. Right, so that's one type, what looks like fern moss. Insa might actually know what this stuff's called. But I'm not actually fussed what it's called. You know, it might be nice to know, I suppose. But it's not going to help me look after it any better. That's for sure. Not a bug in sight so far. Right, now the next stuff is the fluffy stuff, which I didn't take too much of because there wasn't much there. And I'm not sure this is going to be very good on mounts because it, again, it was growing on the ground, so I'm not sure. But I thought we'll have some because it's very attractive. That's a lovely moss. Quite fluffy. And another piece of that. So this is growing on acidic ground. You know, if you've got conifers and heather, your ground's acidic. You don't need to look any further. It just is. Yeah, it's very attractive moss. We've got any more of that tucked away in there? Yeah, another one. A small piece. This seemed to be growing in amongst the other stuff. Didn't seem to be anything special about physically where it was growing compared with the little bit of space next door to it, if you see what I mean. Just seemed to be in amongst the other type of moss. Any more of that? Oh yeah, another little bit. And there's a little bit as well. Right, that's fluffy stuff. And then the rest of it is the stuff that came off of tree trunks. So this would be ideally suited for mounts, simply because it grows on sawn off trees. So it's used to growing on wood. And obviously if it doesn't rain for a while, it's going to dry, you know. So in theory, this is more drought tolerant, so ideally suited for mounts. That's my theory. Plus it's nice and flat, as opposed to the fluffy stuff. There's no absolute need to get every little stick and twig and pine needle off of this. I'm just trying to make it look attractive by getting the worst of it off. That's a big piece. Still don't see any bugs running around. As I said, they'd be, having been disturbed, they'd be running away, trying to escape, I would think. That's my theory, anyway. Yeah, I think we are. I've got one tray over there. And that's going to be for this flat moss, simply because it's a tray that holds water that, in my infinite wisdom, I made holes in the side halfway up. In other words, I didn't want it floating in water. I wanted to be able to pour water in and then the water level would drop down via the holes in the side and settle to a lower level, as opposed to the moss living underwater, which it wouldn't do. This sort wouldn't anyway. Last bit. Right. Away. This tray had moss in it once. This was my moss tray, but the moss level got so low I just let it dry out and the moss died, the little bit that was left, which was very little. Now I'm hoping to be able to get this to use up every little bit of this tray. Trying not to get it on top of itself, if you see what I mean, otherwise it will, the bit underneath will just go brown and die, I suspect. It stays green because of the light. I've got a big piece left over, which I might break and put in the gaps. And if you look at how much went in this tray, and the fact that I've got some left over, that lot there is more than a tray's worth. So I think the 2 trays with the sphagnum moss are going to have to go. And then I can keep that bit to go in with the other, so that one tray can have a mix of different moss. You haven't got any moths. Right, so that's one tray of the bark type stuff. Right, I'll turn the camera off now and sort out the sphagnum. No, we won't. We'll have a sip of the wine. Yes, my plan was to head off about 1:45, 2 o'clock, so that I could do everything before the school traffic got about. But I blew that. didn't leave here till about 2:45. So I've ended up getting back quite late, and there was a bit of traffic around. Not enough to worry about. I mean, like I say, we are still supposed to be in lockdown, so there's an awful lot of people that should be indoors and not out in their cars, really, like I normally am. Anyway, we'll shut down for a minute and I'll be back when I've sorted out some trays. It does seem a shame when it's growing so well, but it's of no use to me. As I said, apart from a humidity tray, as soon as you put it on a mount, it just dies, because it is a bog plant. It's supposed to be sat on the top of acidic water, and as soon as you put it on a mount, it's not doing that anymore, it just dies. So it's of no use. But what is of some use is the other type of moss that's sat around the edge here. No, it's too entangled with the sphagnum. So I'm just going to go and put that on the garden, and as I said, the birds are coming up to the time of year when they're making their nests, and this will dry off and probably start to go brown. So nice nesting material for them. It is a shame, but it doesn't work for the orchids, so it's got to go, because I need the trays. I could get some more trays, yes, but then I'd have to buy them and wait for them to be delivered, and in the meantime, what do I do with my live moss? So this has got to go. Right, that's got rid of that. I'm sure the birds will find a use for it. It might actually start to grow, but I doubt it. Although it's in the total shade, and I put it under the bushes where it's heavy shade, it's not going to hold the moisture. That land out there drains very fast, so I don't think it will grow. But what I've forgotten is in the bottom of the tray was some peat. Well, what's left in there can stay there. It's not going to do any harm, is it? You know, that's the sort of situation it's just come out of. Right. Now, as I said, these trays actually hold water right up to the top, so these are a different kettle of fish altogether. And I'd like to think I'm going to get all of this moss in here and not have to sacrifice the other sphagnum tray. See, I don't even know if this type of moss is even going to be any good for mounts. It's the other tray that I've done that was far more important. But this ferny moss does actually look very attractive. But whether it will grow, who knows? Well, all we can do is try, isn't it? I don't think I'm going to get every bit of this in this tray. I'm going to get as much as I can in there, and what I don't get in there can go out on the garden, because I'm going to leave the other tray full of the sphagnum. It's actually got a couple of ferns growing in it now. It actually looks very nice. Nice patch of green, and it sits underneath my Miltoniopsis, providing extra humidity. Although it does gobble up my flipping RO water, because evaporates off very quickly. Right, sort of settle it in. There's a corner here with nothing in. Right, there we go. So 3 types of moss in there. The stuff that came off the bark, the fluffy stuff, and the fern-leafed type stuff. So I suspect they will all grow nicely in this tray. It's whether they'll be any good once they've been put on a mount. That's the bit that's debatable, and I've got a feeling that 2 of these types might not be. There are some mounts in the grow room. If I searched them out and looked hard at the moss on all the mounts that have got live moss on, I've had some of this fluffy stuff before, and I know I've used it on some mounts, so I could try and find some that's living to find out if it does actually survive on the mounts. Right, so we'll have to pour some RO water in there, get a base for it to soak up, and we'll go from there. So yeah, a nice trip out. As I say, it's not the place I normally go to get moss, but had I gone to the normal place it would have been crawling with people. It's a nice day. I mean, basically the sun's come out today, and it's a nice day. It's fair enough, people going out for their exercise. What a con. There's people out there walking around using the exercise as an excuse that don't normally go for a walk. Still, if people are walking about, it's good stuff as long as they're not going in places where they disturb the wildlife. Because it's that time of year, you know. Birds are starting to think about nesting, and if you've got ground nesting birds, the first bug. That was an earwig, or a young earwig of some sort. I'll put up with that. One out of that lot, I don't think it's bad going, but I mean, look, there's nothing living in this. There's nothing crawling, nothing moving, nothing at all. So done quite well there. And I'll remember that place. As I said, it's not where I normally go. I do go to that area, but I don't normally go there for moss. And quite honestly, that's a little bit closer to home than where I would normally go for the moss. But it's not such a nice walk. That type of habitat has its purposes, and it's quite rare in this country nowadays. Acidic peat type bogs with heather and sphagnum, and that white coloured grass. I've just seen 2 or 3 little creepy crawlies now, but they look like little spidery things, so I don't think they do any harm. And whatever bugs are in there are now going to go out in the grow room. Isn't it wonderful? I take the risk at the end of the day. There's nothing large enough in there, I think, to do any harm to an orchid, because if there is anything living in there, it's got to be little, hasn't it? It's got to be tiny. So we'll go from there. But yeah, the place I normally go is a much nicer walk because it's a deciduous forest, which I much prefer. Where I've just been is a conifer forest, basically, with mainly Scots pine. So totally different atmosphere in a conifer forest. It's much darker. Quite honestly, there's a lot less wildlife, a hell of a lot less. Deciduous forest is full of wildlife. But and this time of year it's easy to see because there's no leaves on the trees yet. So I'm going to have to get this cleared up. Now that I'm looking, I'm seeing little tiny, they're tiny, minute, creepy crawlies, but they're all over the place, so they need to be out in the garden. Right, so trip out, got some moss, pleased with what I've got. Now it's just a matter of hoping that it grows okay, and that when I use it on the mounts it actually takes and actually grabs hold and becomes the basis for, you know, for the mount and the roots to live in. It's about as natural as you can get if you think about it. It's bark, it's got living moss on it, and the plant's got its roots in that moss. So you know, you've replaced the risk of certain media types, you know, and the possibility of I'm going to be here all day picking these bugs off. I need to get this stuff outside. But you've replaced all of those problems with a single unit, a mount, with live moss, with the roots in, the plant's attached, it's as close to its natural environment as you can get for an epiphyte. So your variables are purely your light, your humidity, your watering. And those you've got to deal with anyway, haven't you? You know, I mean, those are criteria for growing orchids that you have to look into. But you've removed some of the worries, but you've got to be able to look after the mounts and water them frequently enough. So you take your choices. See you next time.